When you chase an avoidant, something powerful happens inside their mind and body, something most people don't realize. Instead of feeling loved, they feel threatened. Instead of feeling closer, they feel trapped. Instead of feeling safe, they feel overwhelmed. It's not because they don't care. It's not because they're cold. It's not because they don't want connection. It's because emotional pursuit triggers their deepest survival instincts, instincts built long before you ever came into their life. Avoidants grew up learning that closeness comes with pressure, that affection comes with expectations, and that being needed means losing themselves. So the moment someone begins pursuing them emotionally, their brain doesn't read it as love, it reads it as danger. They start to sense your energy leaning in, reaching for clarity, wanting reassurance, craving connection. And for you, this is completely natural. When someone matters, you want closeness. You want communication. You want stability. But to an avoidant, these healthy desires activate something old and instinctive, the fear that closeness will demand something from them they cannot sustain. They fear being responsible for your emotions. They fear disappointing you. They fear losing their independence. They fear that if they let you get too close, your needs will suffocate them. Your chase, even if gentle, makes them feel like the walls they built around their heart are being pushed against. This is why avoidants withdraw when pursued. Their distance is not about punishing you, it's about regulating themselves. They feel overwhelmed, and the only space that feels safe is the space away from you. Not because of who you are, but because of what their past taught them. They grew up in emotional environments where love felt unpredictable, inconsistent, or heavy. So as adults, their mind now associates pursuit with pressure, even when it isn't pressure at all. Their nervous system reacts automatically, telling them to run to restore emotional control. They need distance to breathe, to reset, to feel stable again. But here's where things get confusing. Avoidants still feel deeply for the person chasing them. They don't stop caring. They don't stop thinking. They don't stop wanting connection. Their feelings don't disappear. Their fear simply becomes louder than their desire. And because their fear takes over, they interpret your closeness as a request they cannot emotionally fulfill. They don't know how to say this, so instead, they create distance. They pull away to protect both themselves and the connection. They believe that if they stay close while feeling overwhelmed, the relationship will fracture under the weight of expectations. The more you chase, the more their fear grows. The more their fear grows, the more they retreat. And the more they retreat, the more you feel compelled to chase. Suddenly, the relationship becomes a cycle where your love fuels their avoidance and their avoidance fuels your pursuit. Not because either of you is wrong, but because you are speaking different emotional languages. You're trying to get closer to feel safe. They're trying to get space to feel safe. Avoidants don't respond to pursuit because pursuit makes them feel like the connection is closing in on them. They lose the ability to differentiate love from pressure. And when pressured, avoidants don't talk, they hide. They don't lean in, they shut down. They don't communicate, they escape into silence. Your emotional intensity feels like too much, not because it is too much, but because they don't have the emotional tools to process it. And here's the part people rarely understand. When you stop chasing, it doesn't make them feel rejected. It makes them feel relieved. It gives them emotional space. It lowers their internal alarms. It gives them room to access their feelings without drowning in fear. The moment you stop pursuing, they finally feel safe enough to feel the connection again. They don't run because they don't care, they run because they care and fear the cost of connection. And the only way they ever come back is when closeness stops feeling like a demand and starts feeling like a choice. That is why chasing makes an avoidant run, not because they don't love, but because they're terrified of what love might take from them. When you stop reaching out to an avoidant, something subtle but powerful shifts inside them. A shift they don't recognize at first, a shift that doesn't look dramatic on the outside, but inside their emotional world it creates a storm. Avoidants are used to being the one who pulls back. They're used to controlling the closeness. They're used to setting the pace of the connection. They rely on the comfort of knowing that you'll be the one to close the gap, to send the first message, to ease the silence, to fix the tension. Your pursuit becomes part of the emotional ecosystem they depend on. It regulates the connection without them having to participate fully in it. But when you stop reaching out, and not in anger, not in desperation, not in punishment, but in a calm, steady, grounded way. The avoidant's internal world begins to shift. At first, they don't take it seriously. They assume you're just taking a break. They assume your silence is emotional, not intentional. They believe you'll come back because you always have. They reassure themselves that the dynamic hasn't really changed, that you're still the one who needs closeness more than they do. But as time passes and your silence holds steady, their old assumptions start to crack. Your stillness introduces a new emotional variable they never predicted: uncertainty. And uncertainty for avoidance is destabilizing, not because they expect rejection, but because they rely on predictability for emotional safety. Your absence disrupts that predictability. Your silence also removes the emotional pressure they felt before. Avoidants don't dislike connection, they dislike the intensity of connection. They fear the expectations that come with closeness. But when you stop reaching out, you remove those expectations. The emotional air becomes lighter. They feel less chased, less observed, less responsible. And that relief is powerful. It lowers their defenses, calms their nervous system, and allows them to feel something they couldn't feel before: their own desire. As long as you were pursuing, their system focused on protecting itself. But when the pursuit stops, their system finally has the space to reflect instead of react. That's when the first layer of realization begins. They notice the missing pieces of your presence. Not in a dramatic, heartbroken way. Avoidants don't process emotion like that. They notice it in the quiet moments, in the small rituals you used to be part of, in the space where your messages used to appear, in the comfort your emotional availability used to give them. Avoidants don't miss people instantly, they miss regulation. They miss the person who made their emotional world feel softer, steadier, safer. When you stop reaching out, they start feeling the difference in the atmosphere of their own life. This shift isn't just emotional, it's psychological. Before, they had the upper hand in the dynamic. They controlled the pace, the closeness, the timing. But your silence disrupts their sense of control. They can no longer rely on you to initiate. They can no longer assume you're waiting. And for avoidance, losing that predictability creates a quiet internal panic. They start wondering why you stopped. They replay old conversations. They analyze their behavior. They question whether they pushed too far, withdrew too hard, stayed distant too long. Your calm detachment becomes a mirror they didn't expect to face. But the most powerful part of this shift is not their confusion, it's the curiosity that follows. Avoidants are drawn to what they don't fully understand. And your silence introduces mystery where there used to be certainty. Suddenly, you're not predictable, you're not dependent, you're not emotionally over-invested, you're not trying to pull them closer. And that unpredictability awakens a part of them that rarely activates: the part that wants to understand, the part that wants to know more, the part that starts leaning in instead of pulling away. Your lack of pursuit becomes the very thing that makes them aware of the connection again. Not because you're gone, but because your energy has changed. Your silence doesn't push them away, it resets the dynamic. It removes the emotional noise. It gives them room to feel instead of fear. And slowly, their guardedness begins to soften. They start noticing their own longing, their own questions, their own desire. The desire that was buried under layers of self-protection for so long. This is the silent shift. The shift that begins the moment you stop reaching out. The shift that quietly draws them back toward you, not through force, but through the power of emotional balance they never expected you to possess. When you stop fixing, explaining, or overgiving, something happens inside the avoidant that they never saw coming. You break the role they assigned you in their mind. Avoidants operate on emotional predictability. They categorize people quickly, not because they're judgmental, but because their nervous system needs to know what to expect so it can feel safe. When you were pursuing them, reaching out first, apologizing when you weren't wrong, smoothing conflict, and filling every silence, they placed you in a role: the one who stabilizes the connection, the one who takes emotional responsibility, the one who bridges the distance, the one who keeps the relationship alive. That role allowed them to stay comfortable, distant, and shielded because they knew you would do the emotional work for both of you. But when you stop, when you withdraw in peace instead of panic, you shatter that identity in an instant. You become someone unfamiliar to them, someone they can't predict, someone who disrupts the emotional choreography they were accustomed to. Avoidants fear emotional intensity, but what they fear even more is unpredictability, not chaotic unpredictability, but internal unpredictability. When the expected version of you disappears, they are forced into a new emotional state. Awareness. Awareness of you. Awareness of the connection. Awareness of their own behavior. Awareness of the space you left behind. Your new calmness doesn't chase them, and because of that, they can't explain it away. They can't label you as needy, because now you're not. They can't see you as the emotional pursuer, because you've stopped. They can't treat you like the one who always reaches out, because now you don't. In one shift, you've rewritten the entire script, and the avoidant doesn't know how to categorize you anymore, and that is exactly what captures their attention. Avoidants are not attracted to predictability, they're comforted by it. But what times pulls them in times is mystery, and your detachment creates a subtle, powerful mystery. Before, they knew exactly how you would respond to their distance. They knew you would text again. They knew you would explain yourself. They knew you would initiate connection. Your emotional availability gave them permission to remain emotionally hidden. But now, with your silence replacing your effort, you become a puzzle they can't solve. You create a dynamic where they no longer feel superior in emotional control, they feel unsettled. This unsettled feeling isn't fear, it's curiosity. It's the beginning of a new internal dialogue. Why aren't they reaching out? What changed? Did I misjudge them? Did they lose interest? Are they moving on? What are they thinking now? Avoidants don't chase people, they chase unresolved emotions. They chase the things that disrupt their internal predictability. They chase the things they can't categorize. And your calm detachment becomes the emotional disruption they can't ignore. It also forces them to face something they avoided seeing, their reliance on your energy. They didn't realize how much they depended on your steady presence, your reassurance, your emotional leadership, until it was gone. And when that leadership disappears, they feel the imbalance. They feel the void. They feel the emotional gap your effort once filled. Suddenly, the relationship feels different because times now they are the one feeling the distance asterisk. Your calmness also highlights the emotional imbalance that once existed. When you stop explaining and overgiving, your true value becomes visible. You're no longer performing love, you're embodying self-respect. Your silence says what words never could. I am not here to carry this connection alone. That message hits the avoidant harder than any emotional speech ever could, because it forces them to confront the truth their withdrawal wasn't consequence-free. It cost them access to the version of you they took for granted. This is the psychological reversal. You stop being the predictable one. You stop being the emotionally responsible one. You stop being the one who cushions their fear. And without that version of you, the avoidant must confront something they never planned to feel. The desire to understand you again, to figure out the new energy you're embodying, to re-engage not because you're pulling them, but because your absence created a new emotional presence, one they can't define, but deeply feel. That is the power of breaking the role they assigned you. It awakens their curiosity, their awareness, and eventually, their desire. There comes a moment, a very specific moment, when an avoidant realizes they miscalculated your energy. It doesn't happen when you cry, when you explain, when you fight for clarity, or when you try to fix the distance. No. It happens when you stop doing all of that. When your energy shifts from reaching to releasing, from anxious to grounded, from seeking to simply living your life. Avoidants aren't moved by emotional intensity, they're moved by emotional contrast. And when the version of you who used to try transforms into a version of you who simply times is asterisk, they feel that shift louder than anything you ever said aloud. At first, they think you're quiet because you're upset. Avoidants have seen that before. They expect you to break the silence the way you always did. But as time passes and your silence stays consistent, something starts to feel different. This isn't the silence of someone waiting. This isn't the silence of someone punishing. This isn't the silence of someone hurting. It's the silence of someone who has reclaimed their emotional center. And that silence hits the avoidant in a place they didn't prepare for their sense of control. Avoidants manage relationships through emotional pacing. They regulate by pulling back, slowing down, retreating into themselves. They assume you will always move forward when they move back. So when you don't, when you stay still, when you stop chasing and stop over-explaining, the avoidant is forced to confront an entirely different dynamic. They're used to you filling the emotional space. Now the space is just space, empty, quiet, and that quiet is louder than any argument, any message, any emotional plea. Your calmness speaks volumes. It says, "I'm not losing myself in this anymore." It says, "Your distance doesn't control me." It says, "I have peace within myself even without your reassurance." And this is where things begin to shift dramatically inside the avoidant. Because avoidants always believed that you needed them more than they needed you. They believed the connection would continue because you would keep it alive. They believed that their distance would never truly cost them anything. But your calm detachment disrupts all of that. They begin replaying memories in their mind. They start noticing all the ways you once tried, all the times you showed up, all the moments you made space for their fear, all the effort they never acknowledged. And now that energy is gone, not in anger but in growth. They don't see you hurting. They see you healing. They sense that you're not checking for them in the same way. They feel that your emotional energy is no longer tied to their responses or their absence. For avoidants, this is unsettling, because for once, the emotional gravity is not centered around them. It's centered around times you asterisk. Your peace becomes magnetic. Your steadiness becomes attractive. Your silence becomes interesting. Your self-focus becomes powerful. They can't read you anymore. They can't predict you anymore. And the avoidant mind craves predictability, so when they lose it, they start paying attention in ways they never did before. This is the exact moment they realize they miscalculated. They thought pulling away would keep them safe. They thought distance would maintain control. They thought you would always be there, waiting. But now they see the truth. Distance doesn't protect them from losing someone. It creates the loss itself. They begin wondering who you're becoming, who you're talking to, what you're doing with your new emotional freedom. Their mind, which used to be calm in your silence, now becomes noisy. And the silence that once comforted them now bothers them. They feel the shift, not because you're gone, but because the old version of you is gone. The version who tolerated inconsistency. The version who overgave. The version who anchored the connection alone. The version who worried more than they acted. That version no longer exists. What remains is someone stronger, calmer, clearer, someone they didn't expect to lose. And in that realization, the avoidant experiences the first spark of something they rarely feel, the fear of missing you, not because you left, but because they didn't believe you ever would. Your energy changed, and that change is what wakes them up. Avoidants don't miss you the way you think they do. They don't immediately feel heartbreak, regret, or longing. They don't sit there wishing they had held you tighter or loved you better, not at first. Their emotions are delayed, slow burning, layered beneath years of self-protection. But when you pull back into yourself, when your energy turns inward instead of toward them, something begins to shift inside them that they can't ignore. It's not the relationship they miss at first. It's the asterisk regulation, asterisk. You provided the emotional stability you offered, the calmness they felt in your presence without ever realizing it. Avoidants aren't good at soothing themselves emotionally. Their entire coping system is built around avoidance, distraction, distancing, independence, emotional shutdown. These methods keep them functional, but they don't keep them fulfilled. They live with an inner tension they pretend doesn't exist, and you, without even knowing it, ease that tension. Maybe through your patience, your warmth, your consistency, your emotional intelligence, all the things they struggled to give themselves. Your presence softened their edges. Your attention grounded their anxiety. Your reliability calmed their inner chaos. They didn't thank you for it, but they depended on it more than you understood. When you pull back, even gently, even silently, that emotional regulation disappears. At first, the avoidant convinces themselves it doesn't matter. They tell themselves they prefer the space. They justify it with logic. It's better this way. I'm fine alone. Nothing's wrong. But that logic doesn't settle the emotional imbalance forming underneath. They go through their day feeling slightly off without knowing why. They feel the absence of something they took for granted. They feel the shift in the atmosphere of their inner world, a world that had quietly learned to rely on your presence as a stabilizer. Avoidants are highly sensitive to emotional energy, even if they pretend not to be. So when your energy pulls inward, their nervous system reacts before their mind does. The comfort they felt from you is gone. The emotional warmth that surrounded them is gone. The pressure they once claimed to hate is no longer there, and instead of relief, they feel emptiness. They start noticing small things, the lack of your check-ins, the missing reassurance, the absence of your emotional strength, the quiet where your nurturing used to live. This is when a deeper form of missing begins. Not because they suddenly become emotional, but because without your presence regulating them, they feel the contrast between how balanced they were with you and how unbalanced they feel without you. They begin to realize that you added something to their life, calmness, safety, warmth, that they couldn't create on their own. They begin replaying how consistent you were, how forgiving, how understanding, how emotionally available. And because avoidants don't give that to themselves, losing it hits them harder than they ever expected. They don't miss the relationship dynamics. They miss the *** emotional environment, *** you created. They miss the version of themselves they were around you, the softer version, the less guarded version, the more open version. Avoidants rarely feel safe enough to relax emotionally with people, so when they do and then lose it, the absence becomes a wound, not loud, not dramatic, but slow and undeniable. And of course, avoidants process this in private. They don't reach out and say, "I miss you." They don't confess. They don't reveal. Instead, they think, they observe. They quietly compare the emotional experience of life with you versus life without you, and slowly, the realization forms. The peace they felt wasn't accidental, it was you. The emotional regulation wasn't them becoming better, it was your presence balancing them. The sense of comfort didn't come from distance, it came from connection. This realization is powerful because it bypasses their fear and goes directly to their need. Avoidants don't respond to pressure, they respond to the loss of safety. And your silent withdrawal removes the safety they didn't know they depended on. That's when they start to truly miss you, not out of neediness, but out of recognition. The recognition that you brought something rare, something grounding, something stabilizing into their life, and now they feel the emotional difference without it. It's in that space, the space your absence creates, that avoidants finally begin to understand the value of your presence. There is always a turning point with an avoidant, a moment where the psychological balance inside them flips. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, it's not triggered by a fight, a long message, or an emotional confession. It happens in silence, in your calmness, in the absence of your old patterns, in the emotional space they never believed you would create. This moment is when the avoidant finally comes crawling back, not out of panic, not out of ego, but because something inside them shifts from fear to desire. It's the moment they realize that approaching you no longer feels dangerous, it feels safe. Avoidants are wired to protect themselves from loss, vulnerability, and emotional overwhelm. They retreat because they fear being swallowed by someone else's needs. They distance because they fear disappointing someone. They shut down because emotions feel too big, too unpredictable, too uncontrollable. But when you pull your energy back, when you reclaim your self-focus, something important happens. Closeness stops, feeling like pressure. For the first time, connection with you becomes a *** choice, ***, not a threat, and avoidants only engage willingly when they feel free. So at first, they notice your silence. Then they notice the loss of regulation. Then curiosity develops, then awareness, then missing, then longing. But the final stage, the thing that actually makes them move toward you, is a psychological realization. Approaching you won't cost them. It won't trap them. It won't demand emotional performance. It won't make them feel responsible for your happiness. They see that you're no longer the version of you who waits, who pursues, who fills in all the emotional space. They see someone new, someone grounded, someone self-reliant, someone they can approach without feeling overwhelmed. This new version of you makes the avoidant feel something they rarely feel. ***, safe enough to come forward, ***. They don't rush in all at once. Avoidants don't do anything suddenly. Their re-entry begins quietly, softly, indirectly. They might test the waters with a subtle message, a meme, a question, a comment, a random check-in, not because they're unsure of you, but because they're unsure of themselves. They're trying to see if the connection is still safe, if they can approach without triggering the old dynamic, if your new energy is real or temporary. They come back slowly because they are trying to avoid the emotional trap they believe relationships turn into. But when they see that you're still calm, still steady, still centered, when they see that you are no longer emotionally chasing or over-investing, their fear begins to dissolve. They realize they're not walking into a storm, they're walking into peace. Avoidants come back when they sense emotional safety, and your new energy signals that safety more clearly than words ever could. This is also the moment they start recognizing the difference between emotional pressure and emotional presence. Before, closeness felt heavy to them because they misinterpreted your love as expectation. But now, they see your value without feeling controlled by it. They see your softness without fearing its demands. They see the connection without feeling responsible for maintaining it. That's when desire replaces fear, their longing replaces avoidance, their curiosity replaces distance, and they begin to feel something they've denied for months or years: the need for connection on their own terms. For avoidants, that's a monumental shift. They don't come crawling back because you manipulated them. They come back because your detachment removed the emotional weight that scared them away. This is the psychology behind why they return. Your independence rewires their perception of the relationship. Your calmness disarms their avoidance. Your silence removes the pressure that triggered their fear. Your self-focus makes you emotionally safe, not emotionally demanding. And emotional safety is the one thing avoidants crave more than love, more than passion, more than intensity, because safety is the only state that allows them to show up authentically instead of protectively. So they come back not because you left, but because you finally stepped into the version of yourself that they feel safe enough to come back to.